Hello and welcome to another Pure Theory Crafting for Marvel Avengers Alliance 2. I'll be honest, the prep work for this video was kind of tricky. By request, I'm doing Age of Ultron Vision, and once I actually sat down to do it, I understood why. He is not as necessarily intuitive, especially as his counterpart, but also just as most of the other heroes. I had a lot of trouble sitting down and going through his abilities. Eventually, what I resorted to in order to kind of come up with builds for him was that I wrote all of his abilities and the basic effects of them essentially on flashcards and slid them around on the table until I started to see things that worked. What really brought it home and helped me understand how he was meant to do is to realize that he is not a flexible character. Now, I'm not saying he's a weak character, but he's not flexible. We'll see this as we go in there and as we take a look at him, but it's because of his resource and his passive that his moves are meant to be used in order, and every third turn is reserved. There is a specific action to take for it. In that last video, the Daredevil video that I literally just finished recording and uploading, I kind of made a comment that that Age of Ultron Vision, although I didn't name him specifically, was not at 30 for me, and that unless I really felt like spending the time and the money on it, I wouldn't sit there and click my way through the store and boost him up to it. Well, while it was uploading, I went ahead and I sat there and I spent money on it and I clicked on it. And that's the reason why I'm down another 60,000 or so silver. Ironically, if you're curious, it takes exactly 65 epic and 1 rare canister to go from level 20 to the very cap of level 29. I have done that often enough to memorize those numbers and know when I have enough canisters that I can do it. I do this way too often. For stats, he's not fantastic. His attack stat is above average. It is. He kind of mixes in his speed and defense. They're average, but his health, accuracy, and evasion are all subpar. And while having a high attack, an okay speed, and a slightly lower accuracy means that he's about average for an offensive character, he then mixes it with an average defense and a below average health and evasion. I really get the feeling, and I'm sure I've read this somewhere, that at least 2 characters suffer from it. I think it's Miles Morales and maybe Age of Ultron Vision. That they actually have a slightly smaller stat pool. That their total numbers don't add up to the numbers other heroes have. I know that I saw that from Miles Morales, but I don't have him, and thus wasn't really able to test it so much. I really need to compare the numbers, or somebody else can if somebody else wants to do this, to compare the numbers for a Age of Ultron Vision to another level 32 star character and see if the final total of all the stats is the same or if it's lower. And I have a suspicion that for Vision, it's lower. That said, because we are reliant on those crystals that we can equip to bring our stats up the final big chunk, it's not a crippling loss. It is something that I really wish that they would address and then kind of say, by the way, we've boosted his accuracy, and so to bring all the stats back in line, because we are going to get about half of his overall stats, or maybe a third of them or so, from those final ISO crystals. It's not so crippling. If you want to use him and if he looks fun to you, go for it. Don't let that hold you back. His leader's bonus increases his attack and defense even further. He is moderately tough for an infiltrator, in that he's higher defense than I would expect the average infiltrator to be, but with a fairly low health pool and a fairly low evasion, he's still pretty squishy. And he doesn't have that natural 20% chance to dodge that his Marvel Now counterpart has. So while he does have an ability to enter stealth, he only has one move that does it. So he needs to be covered. He needs either equip defensive ISO sets, or he needs to be on the receiving end of like having a tank in your party. He's got to be protected one way or another. He's kind of fragile, unfortunately. We'll see as we go through his abilities, he has a way around that. He is, in fact, the best user of the ambushing status currently in the game. But let's take a look at the resource and his passive. They tie together because he is a charge user. Charge is not terribly uncommon. It's not common. It's definitely uncommon, but there are several heroes who have it. Captain Marvel has it. Marvel Now Thor has it. There's some others in there who do. It's not unheard of, but it's also not something that those are not necessarily characters that everybody's running. So you may not have encountered it before. What charge does is that it ties directly into your passive and says that every third action is going to generate some big effect. For Captain Marvel, it's like a damage absorption heal. For Thor, for Marvel Now Thor, it triggers his area of effect shock follow-up attack. For Vision, it's charged calculations. At full charge, the attack deals 25% increased damage and stuns. All attacks gain a stun. Some characters, like Marvel Now Thor, have the ability to generate an additional charge on their action. Vision doesn't have any of that. All of his actions, including his tactical, will generate one charge with the exception of one move. And that move requires you to be at 2 charge to actually have it available. It's just going to be listed as unavailable until you get there. What this generally means for Vision is that he's going to take 2 actions and then a big action, then 2 actions and then a big action, and then 2 actions and then a big action again. And that doesn't really vary because he's only going to get 1 charge per turn. So the goal is to set up so that his biggest, strongest finishing moves can be fired off on the charge turn, and you have to pay attention to that as you're using him. Other characters, the goal with them is to keep their stamina high, or to learn how many moves you can use before you have to recharge their power or their ammunition. For charge characters, it's keeping an eye on how many actions that character has taken, so that you're always firing off the big powerful hits at full charge. It's a little bit different from others for that. I don't have all of his abilities. I drew him, I believe, much later than his Marvel Now companion, although I don't necessarily know that I have a lot of his abilities for the Marvel Now version either. I've never made a lot of use of Vision in either form, which is part of the reason that all of these are at their base star level. Still, we'll go through all of them and we'll take a look at what they do as they scale up all the way to 4-star. Thermoscopic Blast, or Thermoscopic Blast, it depends on how you pronounce it. I say scopic. This is a setup move. That said, since it goes fast at 3-star and finishes at 134, it meets what I think of as that minimum damage rubric for a fast move in order to be a consistent source of decent damage. As long as it's above 120, to me it's an acceptable amount of damage for a fast move, and I do use that as a comparison in other characters. We saw that with Daredevil. A lot of his setup moves didn't reach that amount, so you would use them to apply the buff or debuff and then try not to touch them again unless needed. With Thermoscopic Blast, that's not the case. The moment you use it, you're going to gain focused. Accuracy, we'll see, is big for Vision, and yet his base stats, accuracy is one of his 3 worst by default, and his crystal slots don't necessarily bring that up quite to the level that I would like. Focused is very big for him. It does apply a stack of Ionized. Ionized does stack 3 times. This is one of only 2 ranged energy moves for Age of Ultron Vision, where his Marvel Now counterpart splits almost evenly between ranged energy and melee unarmed. This variant for Vision has 5 unarmed attacks and only 2 ranged energy attacks. He has a debuff move on the side, but he's very heavily centered on his unarmed damage. So this is naturally going to sync up with his other energy move, but out of necessity, your 3rd slot is either going to be the debuff or it's going to be an unarmed move, just because you're going to run out of ranged energy moves that you can equip. That's okay. I treat him like Winter Soldier that way, who has a similar problem of of that his best setup moves are all unarmed and need to be slotted in alongside his range attacks. I'll do the same thing with Vision as we get to the builds at the end. This move does generate a charge. This is not one that you will use at full charge, although it does get the damage bonus and it does apply the stun. There's better options for that big heavy hit. Instead, this will be something you will fire off multiple times to try and stack ionized as best you can before that big, powerful ranged shot. Program Punch, 2-turn cooldown. That does eventually drop down to 1, so you can use it every turn. This is a slow move, although being unarmed, it does benefit from clobbered. It's still not really it does eventually go all the way up to fast. And you'll want it kind of at fast. You'll want it at 3 or 4 star to really make the best use of this, because that cooldown, and it's fairly low overall damage. It's actually below that 120 I would like to see for a fast move. What brings this one back up is traumatizing. This move won't necessarily do a ton of damage by itself, but as soon as the enemy drops below 20% health, or if they start there, this move will finish them off. As long as you're watching your target's health, this move will effectively do more damage than what is listed. And the natural flanking ability that it has, by default at 1 star, means that unless the enemy is stealth, you can kind of pick your target. As soon as somebody gets weakened by a teammate, you can throw this in there. While it starts slow, it does really pick up in speed. Even just starting at 2 star, it gets faster. And being unarmed, it can get faster still. This is a move that you can sneak in during the charging up phase before you get to the big final turn to quickly finish off a weakened enemy. But it's fairly specialized in that that's its primary role, and it won't be used outside of that. Incorporeal Initialization, because Age of Ultron Vision likes his long names. Melee unarmed, this is what I like as the setup move for the ranged build, because it gives him sharpshooting. This is also, by the way, his only real way to enter stealthy. He doesn't have any stealthy maneuvers. He doesn't make use of stealth the way that other characters might. The way that other infiltrators might. We just finished the video on Daredevil. Daredevil makes use of stealth. Black Panther makes use of stealth. Age of Ultron Vision is more similar to Gamora, where he has the option, but it's not really his thing. This gets up too fast and still kind of falls below that damage amount at fast. So I bring this along to kind of buff up the range build, and then just allow him to use the range moves and leave this alone unless he needs to reapply sharpshooting. It's a setup move, and it should be used as a setup move and left there because its individual damage not very high. The setup move for the unarmed side, Digital Trigger, which really, I mean, it's not sure I fully understand that name. Kind of seemed like they were stretching there. Clobbered and Stumbling, 80% chance of both. Stumbling, always fantastic for dropping evasion. We'll see that a high accuracy is what he really wants, and so while Stumbling allows him to hit the target easier, he doesn't exploit it the same way he would if he applied Dazed, and he does have the ability to apply Dazed as well. That said, it does give him Clobbered, and Clobbered is good when 5 of your abilities are unarmed. This move does go up to fast. Its final damage breaks 120. I consider this, especially because it can stack on itself by benefiting from Clobbered, I consider this an acceptable filler move for an unarmed team if you need to fire it off multiple times in a row. On the other hand, you might choose instead to use Meteoric Assault. Melee unarmed, fast speed by default. Generates a charge like most of his moves do. This move has ambushing. Ambushing is currently found on, to my knowledge, 4 characters. I kept saying 3 because really both Visions have it. Both versions of Vision, to my knowledge, have at least one ambushing move. Age of Ultron Vision uses it better than anybody else because he's got 2. He's the only character who has 2. And that I'm fairly certain of. I don't think anybody else has as many as he does, or the ability to chain them together like he does. This move is a setup move in its own right. Its high rate of speed and the ability to apply confident, and there's that accuracy bonus, we want that accuracy bonus, can be used, and this should be used as your second move of the three. So that when he comes back from the ambushing status, he's primed and ready with confident for the big final move. This should be used to generate his second charge, so that the next move is his full charge, and he's already ready for it. This move needs to be at 3-star. If you're going to even spend the AP to unlock it, go ahead and spend the ability to take it to 3-star. And it's because of the cooldown drop. Because of its place in the rotation order, being right before the full charge round, you need to be able to use it as every third action in its own right, and you can't do that by default. Its final damage is more than acceptable for a fast move. The ambushing status is a great burst to his survivability. I've already pointed out that his stats are just not up to where his Marvel Now counterpart is, and that 20% dodge that Marvel Now vision gets through his passive. This is how Age of Ultron vision stays alive, especially in PvP where he's more likely to be targeted. I'll give a PvP build, will make heavy use of his ambushing status. But if you're going to use this move, take it to 3-star and take it there quickly. Pulse Wave. I don't know, call it mixed thoughts on this one. It's a debuff move. It's not going to do any damage. The trick is in figuring out where you want to use it. And to me, it screams PvP more so than PvE. In PvE, healing and shields are very, very specific. In PvP, they're all over the place. Suppress shield, I'm not certain that anybody else really has that. Maybe one or two other characters at most. I think it's fairly unique. It acts like Shield Breaker in that it strips off a current shield on the target. Perhaps more importantly, it's a typeless debuff, meaning it can't be removed, that prevents shields from being reapplied. Now, its short duration means it's only going to last effectively for about one full round of combat before it's gone and wears off. But in PvP, how many times have you triggered barricading in that first round of combat? This prevents barricading from activating on the enemy line in PvP. What makes this one fun is that as a debuff, it doesn't rely on accuracy. Instead, you can fire this off without breaking stealth, tagging all three enemies, preventing shields. This is, especially alongside his Infiltrator class bonus, this is kind of Civil War Iron Man's nightmare. But it's also fantastic as a throw out there against everybody who uses the barricading EISO. It shuts that down effectively. It does start with a two-turn cooldown, which means that it, by default, can fit into a rotation with a set spot. It's leveling it up is still a wonderful thing to do, just because of the speed increase and the cooldown drop there. A funny note on this one. It's his only area of effect attack. Because it does no damage, if fired at full charge, it's not going to benefit from the 25% damage increase. But it should still benefit from the stun application, allowing you at 3-star to use this at the start of combat in order to block barricading, but then, if needed, use it again during the full charge round, the third turn, in order to reapply that if somebody did manage to get a shield up, or if, like, Civil War Iron Man reapplied it to the team anyway. But also to turn it into an area of effect stun, allowing you to swap it in there and kind of use it tactically as needed. Mind Stone. This is his damaging attack, eventually capping out at just under 500 base. This does deal additional damage to high defense targets. He is really good against a defensive infiltrator like Marvel Now Captain America or Civil War Iron Man. infiltrators, or sorry, tacticians with a high defense, he's going to really hurt with this move. Now, he's going to hurt anybody with a high defense. Because he's not a scrapper, bruisers, who tend to be the other ones who really stack the defense, he's not going to have any kind of a class penalty against. The charged attack attribute of this means that it can only be used during the charged round, typically that third turn. And it's meant, and which is why that costing of two, that where it says cost 2 charge instead of generates 1. All of his other abilities during that turn where he starts with 2 will switch and say cost 2 charge. So even those other abilities we were looking at that currently say generate 1 during the charge round, this is the message you'll see, because they'll consume those 2 to get the bonus from his passive. This one can only be fired then, and therefore, even when you're looking at this, treat it as if it were 25% higher. Treat it as if it's going to apply stun, because on the only turn that you can fire it, you're going to get that benefit. It is his other ranged energy attack. There's a natural synergy between this and Thermoscopic Blast. That doesn't mean that this isn't powerful in its own right. It is pretty slow. It is a slow move. His speed is thankfully okay, but this is the big nuke for him, because his 3-star ability does slightly less damage and is instead to be used somewhat defensively. This move caps out at under 300 damage. Mass Manipulation is a melee unarmed slow speed move, but it also has ambushing. This makes him, once again, invulnerable during the ambushing status. The natural 2-turn cooldown means that this can only be used every third move anyway. If you're going to go down the melee side, this is something that you might try putting in there as his charged turn move. Being roughly his second highest damage move, this can be used effectively during the charged round, the full charge round. It does generate a charge in its own right. It's not restricted to that, but you're going to see the best benefit from there, and part of that is deadly precision. I was kind of really thrown at seeing deadly precision on this, because accuracy is his lowest start. It's tied for his lowest starting stat, and he's only going to get like two yellow slots. Accuracy for him is stacked through buffs, not stats. Thermoscopic Blast can give him focused, but on the build that uses this, we won't bring that. Instead, we are going to rely on Dazed and Confident to bring up his accuracy as best we can to increase the damage of Mass Manipulation. If your team can apply Focused, that's even better. This is... I put together a build that makes use of this, that makes heavy use of this. I'm still kind of ambivalent overall, just because of the raw stats that Age of Ultron Vision has. I feel like his accuracy should have been higher than what it's been put at, and that by having 3 stats tied for the lowest, I kind of get the feeling that accuracy should have been tied for attack with him, and that it's a bugged stat value. Because I think that his overall stats are lower than others, and I really, at the end of this video, I may go ahead and I'll sit down with a calculator, do some of the math. I've got a couple other 2-star heroes like Black Panther floating around. I can compare them. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up the stats and see if they're lower in terms of the overall total. But then I'm going to go ahead and increase his accuracy to equivalent value to his attack and do it again and see if that's what brings it up. Because there's the potential there that Age of Ultron's Vision's accuracy was intended to be higher than it is, and it really feels like it should be. Part of that is his tactical. Daze to all enemies, again, is a very fast move, generating 1 charge. This plays into that upswing, downswing of accuracy that Vision needs to make best use of his 3-star trademark ability. I personally feel like Vision's accuracy should have been higher than it is. That doesn't mean that we won't build it up as we get over here into the ISO slots. Do take note that his tactical does generate 1 charge just like all the rest of them do. It is the fastest move he has available to him, and it's not a bad thing to throw out there if you're trying to get the accuracy up. The comparative accuracy up for Deadly Precision. Calculated Manipulations. He is an Age of Ultron variant, which means he has a swap in innate. I've not had the chance to test him, and this could go one of two ways. One, it's utterly worthless in PvP, because it's going to remove mental, physical, and tactical debuffs at the start of combat before the enemy line actually has them. Or two, because what it does is mimics the effect of the Purged debuff that removes all three, I really kind of hope it simply applies Purged. Age of Ultron Thor just says he strengthens the he increases the party's damage when he swaps in. That's all it told us. Well, what he does is apply the strengthen debuff. I haven't had the chance to really test Age of Ultron Vision. I literally got him to 32 minutes before I started recording. If this can apply Purged to the enemy line, that alone significantly increases his value. I have a feeling that doesn't happen. If it does, that is a fantastic bonus. I wouldn't rely on it, which means that having him in the back line is not bad, but having him in the front line, this kind of gets wasted right off the bat. Although a swap out action like Age of Ultron Black Widow's off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of it. Her ability that swaps out and heals an ally can re-trigger this in combat, healing Vision and applying Purge to the enemy line. Still, if it actually applies the Purge debuff and the Purge debuff sticks longer than the opening setup of the screen when everybody is kind of like appearing, then this could actually be a good, powerful swap-in move. One of the better ones. But only if it applies Purged and that Purge sticks around. Looking at his little color quilt here, his attack is his highest stat. There's no red ices. His defense is his second highest stat, and he does get 2. His evasion, his accuracy, and his health, his lowest stats, but he gets 2 evasion, 2 accuracy, and a health slot. He averages his stats out. Instead of strengthening his best 1 or 2, he brings up the lower ones. And for a game where you can really specialize individuals, that's bad. While this does make him tougher than the average infiltrator in PvP, when running alongside a tank in PvE, all that time spent bringing up his defensive stats is wasted. Now, he is a suitable counterpart as an infiltrator paired with a tankless or a half-tank group like Civil War Iron Man, because he can take a hit better than other infiltrators can, and because with his ambushing status, you can set him up to just not even be on the field 2/3 of the time. This allows you to use tougher characters like Civil War Iron Man or Civil War Captain America, who don't necessarily protect all the time, to take advantage of Vision's toughness. If you're going to run with a dedicated tank, Age of Ultron's Vision's his tendency to bring up his weak stats instead of boosting his strong ones leaves him a little bit behind other characters on average. I wish his accuracy started higher and really took advantage of those 2 crystals in ways that right now it simply doesn't. Because of his need for accuracy for his ambushing build, if you run him with those ambushing abilities, in order to take advantage of Deadly Precision, you need to focus accuracy as your secondary stat of choice on pretty much all 6 of the ones that are not yellow. Otherwise, attack or speed is a really good one to use with his ranged energy build, because that one does bring focused on one of its builders. In fact, it brings focused on the charge builder that you will use in the very first round. So it's a little bit less of a penalty overall right there. Still, attack and accuracy, very big things for him. His speed starts out, yeah. And with only 1 white crystal, speed is again something you'll want to put in there. because he spends so much time bringing up his defensive stats on pretty much every crystal you put into him. Doesn't matter what the color is. You'll want to try to make sure that it does have some mix of accuracy, attack, and speed, with accuracy and then attack and then speed probably being the priority order. In terms of set bonuses, coordinated depends for him. If you're going to use his ambushing build, he's not on the battlefield half the time anyway, and he's not really taking full advantage of that set. Unlike his Marvel Now counterpart, his free attack is a melee unarmed attack. So if you are running his ranged energy and you've got him on the battlefield, he's not making full use of it. Instead, if you're going to run him with coordinated, you might want to run him with some of those other melee attacks, uh, like Digital Trigger, so that he's actually in there setting up for melee moves, applying Clobbered, so that he can take advantage of it. I am not impressed with coordinated for him, just because the build that would make best use of melee free attacks will be using ambushing and won't allow melee free attacks. That said, go ahead, and especially if you're going to try him out in PvP, give him Veiled. And we'll see it when I get to the two builds here next. He has two abilities, one as an actual debuff move, one as his tactical, to debuff the enemy line right from the start without breaking stealth before he makes himself a viable target. And I will make heavy use of that for the PvP build. Give him Veiled, especially if you're going to take him into PvP. Because he doesn't have that 20% innate dodge, starting him stealthy is instead a higher boost to his overall survival. His debuffs, and he does apply several, a lot of them do cap at 80%. I think his buffs cap at 100, but 80% is a pretty common number for him. Experimental is probably pretty big for him. Again, this is kind of on the theory side because I haven't tried this out. But I would go ahead and try to give him experimental if at all possible. Give him Veiled, give him experimental, and give him two defensive sets. Rejuvenating, I would skip. And I would skip it because in PvE, you're probably, he's got low health, so impenetrable's anyway, but it's going to help him in PvP. And barricading, always fantastic for low health characters because they tend to trigger barrier. It's how they survive the opening shot, impenetrable or no. So you'll probably want impenetrable and barricading. I don't know how well rejuvenating will work with him if he's spending half of his time ambushing, and one of the builds will make use of that. If you're running him with his energy build, where he definitely is trying to apply debuffs like Ionize that I'm pretty sure cap at 80% anyway, you're going to want that experimental slot in there. Rejuvenating may work. I would still just go ahead and focus on giving him impenetrable and barricading and kind of leaving rejuvenating to the side. Let ambushing be what keeps him alive there. Looking at those two builds, there are other potential builds for him. I would like to hear people weigh in. I have not seen a lot of resources for Age of Ultron Vision. I don't think a lot of people do use him. So if you want to try him out, I'm going to throw out two builds here. Once you've really started to try him out and make use of him, come up with your own, see what works, and kind of throw that back to us, because this is a character really kind of lacking resources in this community right now. I just did the Daredevil video. There's a lot of Daredevil information. Rocket and Wasp, they may be further down the list, but they're on it now. And they've got a lot of resources. This is a character who just doesn't. So, his ranged energy build. This obviously is going to make use of Mind Stone as your third turn move. I don't have it, so I can't slot it in. Imagine that in place of here, because thermoscopic blast is going to be your opener. You're going to aim to bring up that relatively low accuracy with focused, and of course you're going to use this to apply ionized. This becomes his general charge builder after the first set. After that first 3 turns where he hits the charge turn and sets back to 0 charge, you're going to use this to consistently deal relatively solid damage as a fast move. 134 is more than acceptable. while applying ionized every time that he does it. This becomes your charge builder of choice because it's fast. Uh, your second move on the first combination will be incorporeal initialization. It's unarmed, but it will apply sharpshooting for you. Stealthy is the reason we're using this second, because you really want to get both focused and sharpshooting up in preparation for Mind Stone. But by doing this one second, you also have stealthy for the bonus damage on that first Mind Stone before revealed status kicks in. If you're running him with veiled, it's irrelevant because either this or thermoscopic blast will break stealth and put you into revealed status anyway. So if you're not running veiled, use this second. If you are, use either one first. It doesn't matter. Sharpshooting doesn't come up until after you use this, so the fact that it's unarmed means it's not that big of a deal. You're not going to use this move again until you need to reapply sharpshooting. So you're going to use it in the first set, but unless you lose it, you're not going to use it in the second set or anything further on. Mind Stone will be your finishing move of choice. You will use this every third turn, as long as you are benefiting from sharpshooting. And to be honest, even if you're not, because the 40% bonus from sharpshooting is not enough to drag either of his other attacks up to the raw damage level that Mind Stone deals. The goal is to always have it there and ready when Mind Stone's turn comes up, but this is going to be your action every third turn, kind of regardless of anything else. It's why I said his turn order is more fixed than other characters. So the first round of combat, if you're not running Veiled, Thermoscopic Blast, followed by Incorporeal Initialization, followed by Mind Stone, and then afterwards, Thermoscopic, then Mind Stone. And you'll continue to do that until you lose Sharpshooting and need to reapply it. If you get Sharpshooting from a team, then it almost doesn't matter what you put in that third slot. We already covered like Age of Ultron Black Widow. If she's giving him Sharpshooting and Strengthened, then you don't need Incorporeal Initialization. It doesn't really help you as much. A good third slot move in there is probably Pulse Wave, and you'll just use it if you need it. Instead, you'll do Thermoscopic, Mind Stone right from the start. One beam, then the big beam, then a small beam, then a small beam, then a big beam. And you're going to do that over and over if somebody else can give you Sharpshooting. And that's really about as complex as his range build actually gets. His melee build uses a little bit of a different change. There will be 3 different abilities, and you'll use all of them. If you're running him in PvE, that third slot, mass manipulation there, again, I don't have it, and I'm really not going to try to drop 1500 on it because I'm not going to use him anytime soon. I've got other characters I'm working on. Digital Trigger is good in PvE for the debuffs it applies. It does count as you're generating a charge as an opening move, and then from here you launch into your ambushing combination. I originally built this combination for PvP, and as such, I started it off with Pulse Wave. Pulse Wave in that first slot, not Digital Trigger. In PvP, my suggestion, if you're going to try him out, is to give him Veiled, Experimental, Barricading, and Impenetrable. This is already at 100%. And so to be perfectly honest, actually skip the Experimental. Give him Rejuvenating, give him Alerted, give him the ability to bypass Protect or Stealthy or whatever it is that you like. So it does leave you a slot free. You won't need Experimental for the PvP version of this, where you are not running this actual setup move. Instead, by starting with Veiled, you can open combat on that first turn with not only having stripped off their their buffs, but using Necrosis and Suppress Shield in order to prevent healing and shielding, and then while staying in stealth. This is a debuff move. It's not supposed to break his Veiled status, his stealthy status from Veiled. So open with that, and then immediately launch into Meteoric Assault which is ambushing, takes him out of combat, keeps him alive. He comes back, he gets confident for that accuracy boost, 40% accuracy boost, that he then launches into mass manipulation, which takes him out of combat again with ambushing, and then takes advantage of that confident and the damage and accuracy boost it gives to bring him back up above what his opponent has, giving this move bonus damage and allowing it to be a heavy hit. During this time, because he's doing two ambushing moves back to back, it's why I called it Fool Me Twice. The fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Yeah, well, he's going to do that. He's going to go from stealthy to ambushing again. And he's just not even going to be a viable target for most of the enemies. An early area of effect attack is the only thing that might catch him. And that's why we want to put the impenetrable and barricading on him, to keep him alive in that first setup round before he takes off and vanishes for a little while. Because of the reliance on the ambushing status, if you're going to try to apply focus to him, make sure you do it early. He won't benefit from team-wide buffs while he's ambushing. So you'll have to keep that in mind when you're using him. If the enemy line is all PvP meta type stuff and it doesn't necessarily have a shield, everybody's running coordinated, instead of opening with Pulse Wave, you can actually start the ambushing status faster by opening with Unflinching Gaze. Because this is a debuff as well, you can go ahead and throw Dazed across the enemy line. This will aid your team's survivability by dropping the opponent's accuracy by a lot. It also won't break his stealth, and it's very fast, and it kind of sets him up to go ahead and do even more damage with mass manipulation when he gets to it. So that is a potential PvP build for Vision, as well as a ranged energy PvE build that he can run alongside other energy-based characters, helping by applying Ionized with his main filler before he fires off a Moonstone nuke. My final thoughts on Age of Ultron Vision: I feel like his stats, at least his accuracy, is under where it was originally intended to be. That's the impression that I get looking through his abilities. If that's the case, we might see that change down the line. I don't know that it's a bug. I don't know that his stats are actually underwhelming compared to other characters. I do know that because he brings up his low stats instead of strengthening his high stats, he doesn't specialize in the way that other heroes do. And in a game where it's your team that is general, it's your team that's well-rounded, with individual heroes being specialized, Age of Ultron Vision kind of falls behind other characters in that manner, but only in that manner. His abilities, he has two potential builds. 6 of his abilities can be used to do 2 completely different 3 ability builds, with 2 other utility moves that can be swapped in those third slots on both teams. While it doesn't necessarily look like one is meant to flow into another right off the bat, the fact that he's only limited by cooldowns because of the charge mechanic and he doesn't have any other resource, he's more free-formed in his abilities than it looks like at first, but more rigid in their application, because he's always going to try to have one of those 2 big moves be his third attack fired at full charge. And he's more deceptively devastating when fired at full charge than he originally looks, because that guarantees that he's going to stun. Stun should not ever be overlooked. Anything that survives that big shot is not going to get its turn again right off the bat. While yes, the 25% damage means he's frequently going to kill with that last shot, if he doesn't, it buys him time to start it up again. Another potential use, and part of the reason that I like that debuff move being an area of effect and having only a 1-turn cooldown, if it's used during the first round, then it's available during the charged round, and it should, while it won't do any damage, become a team-wide stun, which is another generally nice utility move that can potentially buy time for your team if the combat is dragging on. And at that point, it's kind of up to you as to which one you would actually want to use there, because you're okay to go ahead and start the next chain. Um, do I think he's underwhelming? Maybe not necessarily. I think he's not intuitive. I think people look at him and they look at the other characters whose abilities jump out as obviously combining in ways that Age of Ultron Visions don't necessarily do right off the bat. Typically, only any two of his at any one point look like they go together, not necessarily a full build of three. You really kind of have to put him together and work with him. So less underwhelming and more not intuitive. Especially not necessarily as intuitive as his Marvel Now counterpart, because people put a lot of, especially people who use the Reddit and post online, put a lot of preference on PvP, and his Marvel Now counterpart has a really nice PvP chain that very nicely intuitively fits together. So you'll see a lot more Marvel Now visions than you will Age of Ultron visions in PvP. I would like to see some people test him. I've got a lot of heroes that I'm working through testing right now, or I'm working on trials, spending AP on, so it'll be a little while before I get to him. But if anybody else is feeling bored during this, maybe some downtime that we've got right now, before the next bit of content launches in the next few days, if you want to try him out, give us some feedback. If you do use him, give us some feedback. That double ambushing status looks like it could be fun. You've got to watch it on a team that throws out lots of team-wide buffs, because he's going to miss half of it. But it also is an immense amount of personal survivability. He's just not even there and available to attack until after he's already coming back, until the narrow window between when the attack finishes and when he gets his next turn and launches off into ambushing again. I need to look at the list to see who I'm due to do next. I want to say that Age of Ultron Hawkeye is coming up. Age of Ultron Iron Man and Marvel Now Iron Man, I need to slip those in there. At the time of this video, I don't have Luke Cage and I don't have Marvel Now Captain America, which makes it a little bit harder to do the full video for them because I can't see their ISO slots. While I can see their passives and I can see their level 1 stats, I kind of have to extrapolate how that's going to be at higher levels based on the much smaller number variants there early on. So I'm gonna hope that I get lucky and get those. I've been very unlucky. I've gradually built my gold back up to just over 30, but the amount of time that I spend leveling characters up to 30, I often spend all of my gold on Saturday trying to build up, a few more thousand silver so that I can get more characters to 30 for the purpose of these videos. I have had a very, very poor string of superior power cells in the past little bit. That said, I'm going to wrap up this video. I'm going to take that energy you see at the top of the screen and go back to farming Spec Ops 1-3, see if I can't get some more AP up there and build up some more heroes. We'll call this, for Age of Ultron Vision, potentially underwhelming, definitely not intuitive, and most importantly, underused. There is not a lot of resources on him, which means that not a lot of people are sharing information on him. He may be a hidden gem, and he may work better than we initially think. But he'll need some testing by the community and some feedback by the community before we can really tell that. Doing his video on the same day as Daredevil may be a little bit of a disservice, because Daredevil is extremely intuitive and very powerful right out of the gate. Give Age of Ultron a Vision a try if you want to. This game has a lot of heroes. You can swap them out pretty freely. Give him a try. I fully believe that no hero has no use, and that he is going to hold his own at the least in PvE content. Maybe he's not part of the current PvP meta, but let's be honest, 90% of the currently released heroes are not part of the current PvP meta. So he's not alone in that style. Look for probably Age of Ultron Hawkeye before too long. There's been a lot of requests for Marvel Now Hulk. I'm looking at his abilities already and seeing what I can do with him as well. Somebody made the comment of seeing if I can make him awesome. I make no hero awesome. I just kind of see if they already are, and some of us, like myself, just missed it. Until that time, until I get the next round of Pure Theory crafting all set up and ready for posting, this is I Hoagland. This will be the last one I'll do today. I'm out.